I have had a brief yet odd history with the Resident Evil series. I've never really been into survival horror games, so the series never really appealed to me. But I have dabbled in bits of Resi 4 and Resi 7, and it wasn't until a bit more recently that I played through the original Resident Evil on PS1 from start to end. And I really enjoyed it, and came to understand a bit more why the games are loved by horror fans. So when I saw the reveal of the Resident Evil 2 remake, and I was kinda digging the gameplay, I thought, why not, this looks really interesting. But I was surprised by just how much I enjoyed this game when I finally played it. Now, I have not played the original Resident Evil 2, only the first, but I'm not going into this completely blind. I have seen some gameplay and have a rough idea of the story. I know it plays like the first Resi with fixed camera angles and tank controls, but for the most part this is my first experience with Resident Evil 2, so I won't really judge it so much in comparison to the original, though I do understand that there are some design choices based off the original PS1 version. Oh, and just to say, both gameplay and story spoilers ahead. The story follows a rookie police officer, Leon Kennedy, and Claire Redfield, who is looking for her brother Chris Redfield, one of the protagonists from the first game. They both arrive in Raccoon City to find it infested with zombies due to the T-virus from the first game being spread. They soon get separated and both go on their own quest of survival. While they have a slight differing narrative, with Leon coming across a mysterious woman called Ada Wong and assisting her, and with Claire meeting a young child named Sherry and trying to help her escape the city as well, they both delve deeper into the cause of the outbreak, finding out about William Birkin, a scientist for the Umbrella Corporation, and Sherry's dad, and his involvement in creating the G-virus. Now, I understand that this is an early Resident Evil story, so it does have those sometimes ridiculous and nonsensical elements to it, but there is definitely effort put in to give these characters more depth, at least based on from what I know. They do give time for the characters just to sit down and breathe, even allowing for some heavy moments, which I'm sure wouldn't have been in the original. It's simple, but it does its job of giving these characters more of a motive than just survival, and adds depth through the several writings found throughout the game. Visually, the game is stunning. Using the Eerie engine from Resi 7, it really excels in creating this dark, eerie, and oppressive setting, and man, I do mean dark. It all works in making you feel tense and on edge, even when you're not in danger, just from the atmosphere alone. It does not shy away from the gore either. Every gruesome, fleshy detail and animation of every horrific creature is on show here, and it really gets under your skin. Now, the gameplay is perhaps where the biggest difference is, ditching tank controls and the fixed camera angles for a Resi 4/6 over-the-shoulder style. And I did like the fixed camera angles in the first Resi, albeit after an adjustment period, but I do prefer the over-the-shoulder third-person perspective, simply being that it's just more smoother to control and more accessible. Despite this, the game is still structured around the classic Resi formula, exploring and solving puzzles, managing your very limited inventory space with scarcely limited items and supplies like gunpowder to craft ammo and herbs that can be mixed to heal and give the player some temporary benefits, all while having to consider what are the essentials needed when wandering around and how each enemy encounter needs to be tackled. Every enemy is a potential threat, even basic zombies, now being hard to shoot due to their inconcise stumbling and being huge bullet sponges to compensate for the easier to use third-person control style, now needing to be careful with accuracy on top of ammo management. But even then, most enemy encounters are avoidable, or at least can be escaped with a small amount of damage, depending on how you choose to tackle it. And just when you get used to how one enemy works, the game soon throws you off with a new one. After getting used to how zombies worked, I then encountered the horrifying and aggressive lickers and got my ass handed to me, only to then find a note detailing that they were blind and you could carefully bypass them by walking slowly and being quiet. And even beyond that, you have the really quick and nippy dogs, these sluggish sewer monsters, these plant creatures, and Mr. fucking X. And I should probably talk about him a bit more since he seems to be a big talking point for this remake. In the second part of exploring the RCPD, he shows up and becomes a persistent threat, relentlessly hunting you down, with your only options either being to waste precious ammo stunning him or trying to work around him. He needs to be your top priority, as he will just plow through everything else to get to you. His very presence is felt even when he's not chasing you. Just hearing him stomp around and search rooms looking for you is scary enough. On top of this, having to avoid using your weapons lest he hear the gunshot and use it to pinpoint your location. But I didn't feel his persistence got annoying, as he is well balanced. His attacks can be avoided quite easily and he's not too bad to outrun. He serves to make the already dangerous task of exploring even more tense. Speaking of exploring, I found that really enjoyable in this game, especially in the first half in the Raccoon City Police Department. Carrying forward the great design of the Spencer Mansion, it is designed brilliantly to loop around and is laid out very cleverly to progress through in a gradual way. The hallways are narrow, with each trek through them being potentially dangerous, and soon I became very accustomed to the RCPD's layout and quickly managed to learn and memorize item locations and clue hints. And this made the repeat playthrough with Claire much quicker due to the simple fact that the location and its design is extremely memorable. Not to say the later parts in the sewers and the Nest Lab aren't good, but they're definitely a lot more linear and not as enjoyable as working your way through the RCPD. The repeat playthroughs with Claire and the second scenario were also just as good, but maybe a bit too similar. Now granted, Claire's side does have its differences with not only story beats, including a part where you have to play as Sherry, that was fucking intense, but also with Claire having different weapons altogether, meaning you handle enemy encounters very differently. But you are following the exact same path of going through the RCPD to the sewers, then the nest, solving the same puzzles with the same item locations. I don't know, I kind of felt like there could have been more to differentiate Leon and Claire's campaigns from each other, but it just feels like they do the bare minimum. The B scenario I can kind of forgive, seeing as that it's intended to be a second run through for that character. So following the same path of events is understandable, but I did appreciate the changes in item locations, different puzzle solutions, and encountering Mr. X a lot earlier. I kind of treated it as a new game plus really. But also just to say, I didn't really find the bosses all that good, just quite repetitive and easy. The main question though, is Resident Evil 2 scary? Yes, but I will say that I was never terrified. Granted, there were moments that made me jump. But the best thing is that the fear comes from the tenseness of simply trying to survive. Needing to conserve ammo, never knowing how an enemy encounter will go, taking risks in order to grab items or escape from a dangerous situation. All along with the dark and menacing atmosphere and horrific and intimidating enemy designs. And it was all well balanced, never being too difficult or too easy, whittling it down to your own intuition on how you manage things. It was a good learning curve, like when I was playing as Leon, since it was my first time, I was quite wasteful of ammo and supplies. So with Claire, I was a lot more conservative with my resources, maybe even a bit too much, to the point where I found it a ton easier in the later game. So when it came to the B scenario, I paced things out and balanced the item use a lot more. But overall, the Resident Evil 2 remake was such a surprise experience for me. I found myself drawn in and really engaged with not only a series that I had little experience with, but a genre that I really hadn't had much interest in at all. Each playthrough of both characters was a great and tense experience that I'm happy to say has given me a whole new appreciation for horror games and the Resident Evil series and why people enjoy both of them so much. For the first time, I finally got to understand the fun of being scared, and I'm confident to say it will go down amongst some of the best games I've played in recent memory, despite a few shortcomings. I will happily give the Resident Evil 2 remake a 9.5 out of 10. Thank you so much for watching, everybody, it really means a lot. Feel free to like and subscribe if you feel like it, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.